Hey everyone, welcome back. I'm Michael and we're going to be getting right back into some more Reddit stories. If you enjoy the video, make sure to leave a like and subscribe. Now, without further ado, let's begin. This first story was created in the prorevenge subreddit in 2020 by a now deleted user. The post is titled, "Fiance left me due to my cancer diagnosis. I left her destitute. This was 4 years ago, so the sting is gone and my revenge has been had. Sorry if this isn't the right forum. We dated for 4 years and had what I thought was a great relationship. We were both well-established professionals who owned homes in the same neighborhood, and both had daughters living at home. Her daughter was 11 and mine was 16 when we met. We had actually planned to get married, build a house, and raise the two girls together. We planned the house build because she had recently been diagnosed with a neurological disease that would eventually put her in a wheelchair, necessitating something ADA friendly. During the planning stages, I began doing landscaping and construction projects on her home to increase its resale value. In total, I invested roughly $30K into the home, running everything through my side construction business for tax, permitting, and resale purposes. We had a contract that payment would be made upon the sale of the home. I produced invoices for each and every project, but never pushed for payment because of the prior agreement. Fast forward 6 months, we were looking at property to develop and finalize drawings for the home when I began feeling ill. I couldn't eat, was constantly vomiting and passing blood. I began noticing that my abdomen looked swollen, which was odd because we were both very health conscious and went to the gym every day. So I went to the doctor and began undergoing tests. During this time, she started experiencing small cognitive issues and the stress of her current position was exacerbating her condition, so she took a $20K per annum cut in pay along with a lesser position within the company. After a month or so of different tests and a biopsy, it was revealed that I had a golf ball-sized tumor in my stomach and would need to begin chemotherapy. I started chemotherapy and radiation treatments, which made me, as expected, extremely ill. She was spending time helping around my place on the weekends and staying over more, to the point that they were both at my home more than at theirs. At this point, I suggested that we go ahead and put one of our houses on the market and move in together until the new house was built. I have great supplemental insurance as well as a long-term illness plan, so using that, coupled with the sale of one of our houses, would allow us to get through comfortably and help ease the financial stress on her. Shortly after this discussion, she became extremely distant. Her daughter wasn't coming down to hang out with me anymore, and she had excuses for not getting together. She quit driving me to treatments and stopped staying over. She then dropped a bomb, a sentence that will forever be burned into my psyche. I love you, but I can't see myself taking care of someone this sick in the long term, and I don't think we should see each other any longer. In a text. It broke me. I won't lie. This was the first woman I had ever opened up to and planned a life with since my wife died when my children were 1 and 3. However, I tried to be mature about it. I forced myself to understand her position and to accept what I could not change. The next day, I calmly gathered all of her things, packed them neatly, loaded them into my truck, and took them to her house to leave on the back porch while she was at work in order to avoid any awkward exchanges. Walking around the back and under the porch cover, I set down a box and saw her in her back living room on the couch, having sex with the man she had introduced to me as a lifelong friend. I had had dinner and drinks with this man and his girlfriend. We had even gone on vacation with them. I never spoke of the incident with her and simply sent her a text later, explaining that I would leave her things on my side porch for her to pick up at her convenience. I discovered 8 or 9 months later from his now ex-girlfriend that they had broken up due to him confessing that he had been sleeping with my significant other, dating back to about the time we were finishing drawings on the new home. Now I was pissed. Revenge time. At this point, I had finished chemotherapy and radiation for the time being and was feeling healthier. I was going through some much neglected paperwork when I came across the file that contained $32,680 in unpaid, long overdue invoices, which I promptly sent to my attorney to begin lien proceedings on the home. It turns out that I couldn't have done this a moment too soon because she was set to put her house on the market. Coupled with interest over what was then 19 months overdue, the invoices were hefty. That, along with the agreement to settle them when the house was sold and attorney fees, left her with roughly $10K after the sale of the home and settling her current mortgage. She promptly had to back out of the purchase of another home and moved in with her oldest daughter, son-in-law, and 2 grandchildren. She also had to leave her job and begin receiving disability. I ran into her a little over a year ago and she looked as if she had aged 20 years and was in the wheelchair affair we had talked about. We chatted cordially but briefly, and I excused myself and went on with my day. A few days later, her younger daughter called me and spoke about my running into her mom, asking if we could hang out sometime. I gave a vague answer, thanked her for calling, and again went on with my day. The ex then called me a week or so later and began apologizing for leaving me as she did. Again, cordial but short, I thanked her for calling and hung up. She began texting, and this went on for several weeks until one day she asked if I could ever see us rekindling what we had, to which I replied, I can't see myself taking care of someone so sick in the long term. Remember the box on your back porch? Did you think that, a lifelong friend, brought that over to you from my house? Good luck to you. Goodbye. TLDR, my girlfriend broke up with me due to my cancer, so I ruined the sale of her home and the purchase of another and left her to move in with her daughter. Then I threw her breakup line back at her. I sometimes feel guilt over this, but not much and not often. I've said it a bunch, but I'm a pretty petty person myself, so whenever I feel betrayed, if I see an opportunity to get back at someone, I'll probably be taking it. That being said, I definitely think that OP was justified in this. Some may say that it's better for his mental and overall health if he just moved on, but regardless, what's done is done. If I understood correctly, this woman had some sort of degenerative health condition or something. Despite knowing this, OP remained interested in having a relationship, just for her to turn right back around and spit in OP's face when she was put in the same position. Now, one could make that she was justified in leaving OP because she needs someone to be able to take care of her if her health does decline. But even so, she seemed so quick to drop OP. It felt as though she didn't even give him a chance. Instead, she should have stuck by OP's side and helped him with his treatment. This is the kind of partner that you want out of your life. I'm happy to learn that OP seems to be healthy now, and the fact that he got to see his ex having a shitty time is doubly satisfying. A user named Norsk Chef said, so this woman knows she is headed for a wheelchair, and she has a man that not only doesn't care, but is gonna help her have a home to accommodate a wheelchair and help care for her, and she dumps him so she can bang another guy who is cheating on his girlfriend. Talk about short-sighted stupidity. How progressive is her disease? Is she likely to die at an earlier age? To this, OP said the following. She's in her late 40s now. It took her from an able-bodied marathon enthusiast to a wheelchair in about 8 years or so. I'm unaware of her current prognosis. Another user named Spooky Red said that her friend probably stopped wanting to be with her once she was wheelchair-bound. She lost her job and is on disability now and thought that by rekindling with you would be better for her financially. This is some poetic justice shit right here. OP made the following comment in response. I'm sure some of it had to do with the fact that I had mentioned to her daughter that I had finished building the house, and she saw it as an opportunity. Living in a 3-bedroom home with 6 occupants, 2 toddlers, and a teen plus 3 adults has to be rough, especially when all 3 bedrooms are upstairs. So inevitably, there had to be some less than optimal adjustments made. User Deadly House Frau said, I feel like if she hadn't been cheating and her reason for breaking up had been, we both are going to have a lot of medical issues. And as we both just saw, stress exacerbates mine, as I'm sure it does yours, so let's both take things to chill for a little while so we can handle this medical stuff. That would have been a reasonable self-care request, but the way she did it was really, hey, I've only been using you for your better income and stability, given that I'm going to be in a chair soon, so if you're sick too, I'm out of here. How awful for her daughter, who thought she was getting a new sister and dad. User Important Hat responded under this comment. Yeah, her daughter was one of the things that was weighing on my mind. Like, they dated long enough that OP was probably like a stepdad, and she had a stepsister too. I also wonder how OP's daughter took it too. Glad that he's doing a lot better now, as well as I've seen from comments. User Anovisk 2001 asked, what was the aftermath of that text? We want to know, please. OP said, not a lot really. She called me petty for using it against her. I just shrugged to myself and moved on. It was in a way a little petty to continue the conversation until it led to that point, which I assumed it would, but when you see both ends of a circle about to meet, you may as well hang around for the introduction. A user named Lady Valkyr said, some people are broken. Glad you came out the other side. Under this comment, OP said the following. She was definitely prone to having an alternate thought process. She was raised in the States but married a fairly well-off foreigner from Europe. 20 years later, after divorcing him and fleecing him pretty well, she moved back to the States, where she spent the next few years running through her divorce settlement. Her being used to traveling all the time, buying new cars every year, and just having a devil-may-care lifestyle really stunted her views on how the world worked until she actually had to go back to work for a living. My diagnosis and subsequent downturn really stunted her way of life, and kept her from doing all the things she wanted to do before her illness took over. I personally don't think she really had the capacity to love another human being as much as she loved herself. Basing your worth on material things and social status can do that to a person. User CA's Basque said, "I don't get her logic of being unable to take care of someone long term, especially since she'd be in a wheelchair and will obviously need long-term care. Or like planning a marriage with someone, does sickness and health mean nothing anymore? You got out at a good time, OP. Congrats on beating cancer." Under this comment, another user named YWG Flyer said she wanted a free ride for life, and when OP was diagnosed, there was a chance that the free ride might have ended sooner than anticipated, so she bailed. As soon as she saw that OP had recovered, she immediately tried throwing her lure back in the water, fishing for the resumption of the free ride. Then another user named NightPanda893 also commented under this thread. "I mean, I actually understand her logic. It has to be a huge burden to care for someone like she had to at the time, and her inevitably needing long-term care may have made it even scarier to take that responsibility upon herself while simultaneously potentially losing who may have been her caregiver. As cold as it was, I wasn't necessarily in agreement with the need for revenge at that point. However, the infidelity sealed the deal. A user named Happy Haven 1984 said, "Don't feel guilty for karma catching up to her. It's pretty messed up of her to say she didn't want to take care of you, fully well, that in the long term, you'd be the one taking care of her. Bet the longtime friend bailed once her health took a dive." To this, OP made the following response. "His ex and I have remained on friendly terms, and from what she's told me, he left my ex as soon as she needed a place to go. It turns out that he and my ex weren't lifelong friends. They had dated off and on for a couple of years before I came along. At least that's the story I was given. I don't believe much of what comes from the mouth of a jilted lover, so I'm not sure how much truth there was to the claim." This next post was made 2 months ago in June in the pro-revenge subreddit by a user named Fluffy Supermarket 6. The post is titled, "Fired from my job, but received a year's worth of pay and got my boss fired." This happened around 2011 to 2013, before the advancement of technology in video editing and content creation. I was hired as a content creator for a university that wanted to leverage YouTube to kickstart its branding campaign. The pay was low, roughly $2K, and in those days, there were not many video content creators around, and the process usually took a long time from start to finish. I was hired, and on my second day, my manager presented my KPI of 85 3 to 10 minute videos in 52 weeks, which was impossible for a one-man team at that time. This meant I had to handle scripting, producing, casting talent, shooting videos, composing music. They were too cheap to pay for a royalty-free music subscription, and editing, all of which I had to do using my own equipment and software because their cameras and computers were so old that they simply couldn't handle the strain of even producing content in 720p, much less 1080. I tried to let my manager know, but she just smiled encouragingly, telling me to give it a try and assuring me that if the videos were good, the quantity would not be what she focused on. Hearing this, I agreed to give it a try. My manager treated me well in the first month. However, one day when she found out I was a smoker, her attitude changed overnight. A colleague had actually done a facepalm when I told her about it and let me know that the manager hated smokers and often advocated for getting them fired. She started nitpicking everything from my smelling like cigarette smoke after breaks to coming in 5 to 10 minutes late, despite doing more than 4 hours of overtime daily and not being contactable during break times. The list goes on, but I soldiered on because I just wanted to do the work and do it well. 5 months in, I was called into the director's office where I saw my manager putting on her best displeased but gleeful face, and I felt my stomach drop. The director told me that she was disappointed because she had heard that I was falling behind on my work. It was already halfway through the year, and I had only completed 30 out of my 85 videos. I tried to explain that I had been working my butt off on these videos. I literally worked 6 days a week, over 60 hours, just to do what needed to be done. Being a one-man army made things impossible, and the videos I had put up had garnered the highest views ever on their YouTube page. I also recounted how my manager had said she was looking for quality videos over quantity. The director dismissed this and stated that the KPI was simply 85 videos in a year, and since it was almost half a year in with my numbers at less than half, she felt it prudent to cut the cord early. I asked how they would even meet the KPI if they were to fire me now. My manager snorted, saying, "We'll find a professional production house to finish your work." The director gave her an odd look, but nodded in her support nonetheless, telling me, "You don't need to worry, manager will get the job done." That was when a light bulb went off in my head. Seeing as I was the content professional in the office, one of my jobs was to keep a database of production houses to use in the event we needed to do a shoot that required more resources. I was sure they would be using the production houses in my database as my manager had no contacts in the production industry, so I changed the contact numbers and messed up all the emails on all of the entries except one. The one I kept intact was for a friend who was working as a junior director. Not an assistant director, but a director assigned to smaller video projects. I gave him a call and told him about my plan, and sure enough, within 2 days, they were called in to pitch. I explained that I had a plan that would be a win-win for us. It would instantly help him and put him on the fast track to a director position by bringing in that much business to his production house, and it would also benefit me financially. I would teach him exactly how to pitch to win over the boss and the director, and in turn, his company would pay me a standard finder's fee of 15%. He agreed instantly and immediately put me on the line with his general manager, who, upon realizing this was to be 6 months of work for a high 6-digit payout, instantly agreed and drew up a contract. As it turns out, after I gave them a metaphorical step-by-step playbook, they were the perfect fit, somehow understanding the needs and style of the university as well as the themes the university wanted to feature. The director and my former boss were amazed that my friend's production house was so familiar with their content that they signed them up on the spot. Now, even back then, using a production house was not cheap. Each video they produced could cost double to triple my monthly salary, given that they had specialized people for each function. Producer, director, director of photography, gaffer, sound person, video editor, assistant director, production assistants, etc. However, this meant that they could complete a video every 2 to 3 days. So yes, they produced 50 videos in a span of 4 months for over 100 months of my salary, and I sat back and collected the healthy 15%, which was about 15 months of my salary. This allowed me to set aside money for a holiday and use the rest to further my studies at a respected film school overseas. I thought my plan ended there and that I had gotten back at my former bosses, but to my surprise, I received a call from my colleague while I was on holiday in Bali one day. This was the same colleague who had facepalmed when I told her that my manager had found out I was a smoker. She told me that my former manager had been fired and that my director had received a massive reprimand from the chancellor of the university. The content creation project for which I was hired had only been given a budget equating to about 1.5 years of my salary, and they had exceeded that budget by over 10 times. My former manager was so desperate to ensure that her content creation project could be completed that she threw caution to the wind, paying anything to get the job done so she could show my director that she had completed the project and had approved the massive spending without getting consent from the director. So that is how I got my friend a super fast promotion to a full director in his production house and a year of pay after I was unfairly fired from my job. OP's boss got exactly what she deserved. Someone like her should not be put in positions of power. Based on the information I heard, she doesn't seem to really know anything about the field. In order to be a good leader, you don't need to necessarily excel at everything. Instead, you need to be decently knowledgeable in all or most areas. But it didn't seem like she had knowledge of anything when it came to content creation. In case you don't know, this is actually my second channel. For about 1.5 years on my main channel, I was a one-man show. I handled all of the research, scripting, voiceover, and editing all by myself, on top of working a normal job. So I really resonated with OP here. Good on him for serving this woman justice. A user named Jem Hadar Slayer said, "People who have never done video editing have no clue how laborious that shit is. I can't even imagine people that produce CGI. The disrespect that the creatives get from people who have never done those types of jobs is hard to believe. Under this comment, a user named Floundering Wolverine said, also, it wasn't just editing. OP mentions they were also responsible for producing, shooting, casting, composing, and probably a whole bunch of other things. That's not a video editor, that's a whole production studio, especially if they're asking for more than one video per week. That's a truly insane ask. User Lineage LCH said, video editing for a university. The stuff of nightmares. School administrators typically have no sense of reality and treat Marcom and creatives like garbage. User And How's That said, this happened years ago. Around 1994 when I was 18, I agreed to a contract and an hourly rate with a company owner, an acquaintance of my dad at the time, to measure up their production facility to create planned maintenance drawings. These drawings would identify all the spare parts that needed routine replacement at scheduled intervals so the machines could be repaired out of hours and would have zero downtime. All work was to be done on my own computer. I had just finished the main set-out drawing, fully dimensioned, and took a scaled printout to the meeting in order to claim my first payment installment. This was about a month's worth of work. I had produced a detailed invoice of my hours and had a disk of the CAD drawings. Well, this owner decided he didn't like the rate we had agreed upon. He wanted to pay me a third. He said he had a business contact, a different acquaintance of my dad, who would do it for less than a third. So I said to him, if you don't pay me, I won't be giving you the CAD file. I knew it would take a really long time to copy the drawing into CAD, and it would certainly cost far more than I was charging. This was a big man, and I was a very light 18-year-old female. I'm not exactly tall. You should have heard him shouting like a toddler as I walked out with my printout. He was so red in the face. He thought I would be a pushover. I never raised my voice once. He couldn't comprehend how I would dare to say no. For weeks after, my dad kept asking me to give him the disc. Obviously, I said no. I didn't get paid, but knowing what he ended up paying was more than enough satisfaction. Alternatively, if the business contact's bluff was called and he had to perform the contract at the agreed rate, this guy was a fragile old man near retirement, and this was a dirty environment to measure up in. About 3 months after that, I got a similar contract at another factory site in the same town for a lot more money. I found out when they awarded the contract that the other bidder who lost against me was none other than the business contact. Whenever I saw either of them around town after that, I would have a big grin on my face. It made my day every time. The money I earned on that contract more than made up for the money I had walked away from. This final post was also made in the Pro-Revenge subreddit. OP's account is named Fabine. The post was made 7 days ago and is titled, "We reverse gazumped a greedy landlord and it was glorious." Gazumping occurs when an agent or seller accepts an offer you make to buy a property at an agreed price, but the property is sold to someone else. This usually happens when the vendor sells the property for a higher amount. This happened 15 years ago and is one of my life's proudest moments. My best friend and her husband have 5 kids together. They lived in an expensive city and rented an old 4-bedroom house for $400 per week. The house was very run down with a disgusting kitchen and stinky drains, but it was all they could afford. Still, they made it work. The owner was a nice old lady who was extremely wealthy and fond of my friend. She froze the rent for 5 years and promised to let them buy the house once they had saved enough to get a loan from the bank. As she had helped other people in a similar way, they knew they could trust her, so they saved every cent they could. It took them 5 years, but they finally told her they were ready. 2 days later, the nice old lady passed away before anything was put in writing. Enter the new owners, the lady's 4 children, each highly wealthy in their own right. They inherited a huge portfolio of properties. When they first spoke to my friends, they assured them the sale would still go through, but they would have to wait until probate had settled. Confident, my friends started making some changes to the place. They began by stripping wallpaper, painting, and making plans. Finally, probate was settled and the owners agreed to proceed with the sale for the previously agreed price. My friends applied for the loan, but to their shock, it was refused. The owners had raised the asking price by $80K without telling my friends. The house would be put on the open market to make things worse. There would be an open house in 7 days, and with the market the way it would probably sell immediately. My friends were devastated. They might be able to borrow enough, but it would take longer than a week to get it. To make matters worse, property prices had soared recently and rents had gone up a lot while theirs had been frozen. Not only would my friends struggle to get the money, but if the place was sold to someone else and they were asked for a higher rent or were evicted, it would be nearly impossible to find an affordable place with more than 2 bedrooms. I was scared for my friends, but I was also incandescently angry. Those greedy sods were some of the wealthiest people in the city. They were screwing over a struggling family for less than $20K each. They didn't need the money. It was pure greed, and it was obvious that they'd always planned to do this. So, while my friends scrambled to come up with the money, I started plotting. I looked up advice on what helps to make a sale. We needed to make the place as undesirable as possible without making my friends look like bad tenants. Uncluttered, we moved all the furniture in from the walls, added some extra furniture, borrowed ornaments, and hung a load of motorcycle memorabilia on the walls. The place felt smaller. Smell, my friend boiled a head of cabbage on the stove and we sprayed ammonia around the front and back doors because it smelled like all the neighborhood cats had been marking their territory. We also poured 24 rotten eggs down the drain to make it smell like sewer gas. Neighborhood. We obtained a moldy old couch and dumped it in the front yard of the neighbor across the road, with permission of course. We started calling friends for help. Anyone with a loud and crappy car was asked to do a few laps in front of the block during the open day. The street was unusually busy that day. Everyone we knew found a reason to drive by. It was practically rush hour. We called out mates from the rugby club, full contact football without any of that soft padding. A big portion of our club consists of very large men. The next door neighbors set up a barbecue in their front yard and we offered free food and cheap beer. They came on motorcycles wearing their roughest gear. There was quite a crowd. A lot of people showed up for the open day. Quite a few were in and out within minutes. One lady sat in her car and watched the party next door before driving away. The one bloke who stayed any length of time was brave enough to start a conversation with someone leaving the party. He asked if they were often there and was told that every couple of weeks or so they have an after-party morning and the party the night before was 3 doors up. The partygoer also helpfully mentioned the troublesome drains that are always getting blocked by tree roots and stinking up the place. The potential buyer left without making an offer. So my friends were the only ones to make an offer. They still had to pay more than they'd planned, but not as much as the greedy bastards wanted. My friends signed the papers and paid the deposit that day. So when the brave buyer put in an offer of $30K more than my friends, there was nothing the owners could do about it. Strict anti-gazumping laws. I would have loved to see the owners' faces when they found out. For all the people who are saying they had cheap rent, they didn't. $400 was the rent in 2004, and that was pretty high back then. By the time the lady died, the average rent for a house that size had only gone up by about $40. Nowadays, 4-bedroom houses in that area go for approximately $800 per week. Man, that old lady is kind as for freezing 5 years worth of rent. That woman probably came up from nothing, or maybe very little, so she likely understood the struggle. If she was wealthy, I would assume that her children grew up in wealth and thus never understood what it's like to have to grind through the trenches of life. If you're already rich, an extra $80K isn't going to make your life significantly more pleasing. That's just greed. A user named LiveTomorrow4865 said, "It's nice to see the good guys get a W here and there. This is a beautiful story and I am in awe and admiration of the reverse fuckery. About time. Your friends now have a valuable wealth-building asset, but more importantly, a family home where their children can feel secure." I often think back to the first house I bought, and I know it features heavily in my child's mythos. She still has dreams about it and so many positive memories. Now these kids will get a shot at the same, and that's wonderful. To this, OP said the following: "You'll be glad to hear that it's turned out well for them. They worked hard to pay off the mortgage and fix the place up. Eventually, they were in a position to put that place up for rent and buy another nicer place to live in. They are good landlords and are considerate of heirs and tenants. My friend's eldest son is 23 and just bought his first home. Their second son is now working towards his first place." User Act Stunning 3285 said, "Reminds me of when banks or corporations would reclaim a struggling family's farm and put it up for auction. The whole town of farmers would turn up and the original owner would bid for a penny while everyone else just there silently or bullied the other people bidding into dropping their bid. The farm would go back to the owner. Collective solidarity wins again. User Rihanna79 said, "This is a good story." The first thing that jumped out at me though was the issue of them starting to renovate before they closed on the house. This is one of the reasons that you never count your chickens before they hatch. And by that I mean never spend money on something that isn't legally yours yet. They should have waited till after closing to start any renovations on that house because only the owners would benefit, and when they started spending money to renovate, that wasn't your friends. User OU812 Why Not said, "Something similar happened to my sister-in-law years ago when she was starting to look for a home. The house she fell in love with was an estate sale, and the executor of the estate was the best friend of the person that passed away. It's important to note that my sister-in-law is a teacher, and she put down earnest money right away. The executor was super happy because her friend was a teacher, and her friend had stated that she wanted the home to go to a teacher. Done deal, right? Well, the kids of the former owner did not like what the initial price of the home was going for, so they threatened to take it off the market. My sister-in-law ended up paying more for the house because of this. I always felt like she should have fought this, but she loved that house. I wish we had some kind of law to prevent what those kids did here in the States."